In the manuscript of Siwa, we read about two armies buried by the sandstorms. The first army was an armed troop that left Siwa to meet the Muslim invaders, but they were taken by surprise when a sandstorm buried it in the sand and obliterated it completely from the face of the earth. The second ill-fated army was the army of the Black Tebu tribe, which intended to attack Siwa, but its soldiers lost their way in the desert. Both tales could be correct, but each of them could also be just an echo to the story of Kambiz in a different context. Siwa Oasis is located in the Western Desert, which stretches for 681,000 square kilometers, forming more than two-thirds of the total area of Egypt. The oasis is the lowest depression in the northern part of the desert, as it's a part of a gigantic limestone hill that descends across the desert from south to north, reaching 18 meters below sea level. So it's surrounded by vast areas of desert in all directions, and its nearest city is Matruh, which is 300 kilometers far to the north. The Persians invaded Egypt in 525 BC, ending by that the period of the 26th dynasty. The invading army was under the leadership of Kambiz, the son and successor or caliphate of Kaurash. During his stay in Egypt, he decided to send three armies. The first one to Nubia, under his personal leadership. This campaign failed drastically after a whole lot of calamities that hit it, and the rest of the Persian army returned. The second campaign was meant for Carthage or Tunisia, but it never started, for the Phoenicians who were helping Kambiz with their fleet refused to fight the Carthaginians, who were their cousins. The third campaign headed towards Amun's oasis or Siwa. It's quite understandable why Kambiz wanted to send two armies or campaigns to Nubia and Tunisia, but there isn't one convincing reason of why he directed a campaign towards Siwa, unless he held a grudge upon its prophecy. It's possible that the Oracle of Siwa had predicted a miserable ending to Kambiz and his regime in Egypt in a short time. Thus, he wanted to punish the priests and, in the same time, prove to the Egyptians and the Greeks who believed in the prophecy of Amun that the Oracle of Siwa and its priests could neither benefit nor harm them. Herodotus is the most ancient source of information about that incident. He says, when Kambiz arrived to Thebes on his way to Nubia, he recruited an army of 50,000 men and ordered it to attack the Ammonians and enslave them and burn or destroy Zeus' prophecy. He added that the campaign against the Ammonians left Thebes with guides and arrived to the city of the Oasis, which is Kharga Oasis. Kharga is away from Thebes by a 7 days walk across the desert, and the Greeks know it with the name the Island of the Blessed. After the campaign has left El Kharga Oasis, it disappeared completely and never reached anywhere in Egypt. Herodotus continues his story, saying that there is a tale told by the Ammonians and others who listen to their tale that states that after the men left the oasis and while they were having lunch, a sudden wind that was extremely violent blasted and heaped the sand in piles above them, and thus they perished forever. Ammon has avenged himself from those who wanted to destroy his temple and seek the evil path to kill and enslave its priests. The loss of this army and the miserable ending of Cambyses himself must have multiplied by thousands the standing and reverence of that prophecy. In the ancient world, there were several centers of prophecies located in the Greek world and by the Mediterranean coast. The one that was on top of all the centers was the Oracle of Ammon in Siwa. The rulers and leaders of the Greek cities used to make pilgrimage to Siwa and ask the oracle about the future, long before Alexander the Great's time. The priests of Ammon in Siwa were asked about Cambyses and the Persian invasion to Egypt. So they replied that the Persians will leave and that Cambyses will meet an ill fate. Since the competition was fierceful and rising between the Persians and the Greeks, the reply or prophecy of Ammon came to blow the fire of the strength and strong will of the Greeks and calling for their unity. Cambyses wanted to prove the triviality of those priests and sent an army to Siwa to destroy the temple and kill its priests. As for Cambyses' fate, the multiple calamities led to his bad state, which was worsened by the spread of riot in his country after he killed his brother. So he rushed back to it and started a killing frenzy of people around him until the situation got completely out of his hands. So he committed suicide in 522 BC. The irony is that, after all, the prophecy of the priests of Ammon in Siwa was fulfilled, and ultimately the oracle triumphed. It's quite possible that the number of the army men sent by Cambyses was exaggerated, but that doesn't change the historical fact that the army sent by Cambyses in 524 AD to Siwa was buried under the sand of the western desert, somewhere in the midway between Kharga and Siwa. The strong desire of discovering the location of that disaster has inflamed the imagination of the desert's travelers for decades, especially after the use of cars in the 20th century. But no one has succeeded in finding a lead that would unveil that mystery, and even when small planes were used, the search led to nothing. Explorers believe that the lost army is considered a buried treasure that's worth millions of dollars, and they have spent a lot of time calculating the price of selling the lost army's weapons to the museums and the antiquities collectors around the world, for it's guaranteed that the dry desert sand has preserved these weapons and gear, in addition to the personal belongings of the soldiers, and who knows, some dreams may come true. During the Pharaonic and Roman and Middle Ages, The caravans used to pass through the desert and its oases in order to reach the Nile Valley, and from there they could head to their destinations in the east or to Central Africa. The pilgrimages of North Africa on their way to Mecca in Saudi Arabia prefer to use the caravan routes which cross the oasis, as it has been used since the most ancient times for being the shortest routes. In the same time, it was safer than the coast route, which was abandoned and couldn't supply fresh water. They used to travel in large caravans with the tradesmen and other travelers, and they were all under the protection of the caravan's guards. These caravans used Siwa and considered it one of its most important stops on the road. From there, they reached El Bahariya oasis, and after that they continued in their trip through the desert to the Nile Valley and stopped in Cairo for a short visit. From there they proceeded to El Bahnasa to get a boat to Kous or Kaft. Then they crossed the eastern desert to El Qusair by the Red Sea. As for the other travelers who were not willing to visit Cairo, they headed from El Bahariya to El Farafra, then to El Dakhla, and arrived finally to El Kharga, which was an important stop for the caravans on the famous caravan route to Farshut by the Nile. And from there they went to Kous or Kaft. Then they crossed the eastern desert to El Qusair by the Red Sea, then headed to Mecca. During the early centuries, Siwa and the other Egyptian oases were visited by thousands of people, but unfortunately, there is no record of their visits, as most of them never cared to give details of these visits. One of the famous visitors is Leo Africanus, who roamed across North Africa in the first quarter of the 16th century. He visited Siwa during one of his trips and said that its locals are dark brown in color and that they are rich but economical. They traded with the inhabitants of other oases, especially Gharboub oasis. According to the historians Bellini and Strabon, the traveling distance from Memphis, the old capital of Egypt, and Siwa, following a straight line, was 560 kilometers, and it took 12 to 14 days to travel using camels. Traveling from Alexandria to Siwa in a straight road took 9 days, as the distance is 480 kilometers. The closest city to Siwa is Marsa Matruh, which lies 300 kilometers far to the north. It took Alexander the Great 8 days to travel between the 2 points on the back of camels. The journey of Alexander started from Praetonium to Ammon Oasis in the winter, between the end of January and the middle of February in 331 BC. According to Plutarch, Alexander received the gift of the divine assistance during that harsh trip, especially in supplying him with water when it was scarce, and in showing his caravan the way when it was about to get lost in the vast desert. After a hard and dangerous journey in the desert, the caravan of Alexander arrived to Siwa. The caravan members were shocked by the marvelous scene of the water flowing from the springs and the magnificent shade offered by the palms and the olive trees. This desert route, which Alexander had used to reach Siwa, is the same one used by travelers before him and visitors after him. It's 300 kilometers long, starting from Marsa Matruh port. It was also used by the travelers of the ancient world who came from the various Mediterranean islands and cities to consult the oracle. The name of that route on the survey map is Masrab al-Istabl, but the Bedouins called it Darb al-Mahashas. Now this road is paved and safe for traveling by cars, which cross it in 3 hours. Donkeys were the only means of transportation between Siwa and other cities. But ever since camels were used in the Egyptian desert as one means of carriers and transportations in a wide range in the 4th century BC, the camel became the most loyal friend of the Bedouin and the most beneficial in serving him. Until the use of cars, there was no means of transportation used by the Siwians or the oasis visitors of Bedouins except the camel. That means was used until the beginning of using cars in the Western Desert during the First World War. The date of the first car arriving to Siwa goes back to 1917, when few military cars arrived there after the retreat of El Sayed El Senussi troops from Siwa in the same year. Ever since excavations of petroleum and building freshwater factories and researches started in the oasis in the 70s, an airport was built, and a regular bus travels from Cairo and Matruh to Siwa, on which tourists can depend to come to visit this magnificent paradise in the middle of the Western Egyptian desert.